what's happening in a complex situation where we're not told the truth on most things. So you have to figure out what's going on because no one's going to tell you, and maybe last of all, the New York Times. So it's a real problem to understand this crisis. Let me basically say at the start that we're on an extraordinarily dangerous path of escalation between Russia and the United States. And the war in Ukraine is largely, in my opinion, a proxy war. It's Ukrainians fighting and dying. It's American weapon systems, intelligence, so-called officials, strategists, political finance that is backing this war. So this is, to all effects and purposes, a war between the U.S. and Russia, though fought in a proxy way so far. Our goal, we're told from the U.S. side, is to defeat Russia and force it to leave Ukraine after what is described as an unprovoked invasion on February 24th. I think there were lots of provocations, so the situation's more complicated, but let me just start with the desired outcome. I don't understand it. I don't understand how it could conceivably be achieved. We think that weapon systems and sanctions and fighting will wear down Putin or get him overthrown, and something will change and Russia will go home because they realize that this is not worth it for them. And maybe the U.S. model, and by U.S. I don't mean us, the American people, we have no part in any of this. The model of those who are prosecuting the U.S. side of this is that it's like Afghanistan or Vietnam was for the United States, that after it gets sufficiently bloody and useless, you just go home. I think there's a huge difference, which is that from Putin's perspective, but I think it's more general than that. It's not just one person. From the perspective of the Russian political actors and elites, the situation in Ukraine is not like America in Vietnam or America in Afghanistan. It's exactly in the neighborhood. And so it's viewed in Russia, I think, I'm not sure, but I think in much, much starker terms, that we will not lose this war because this is a war about Russian security. That's the Russian view, okay? You could say they're crazy, not crazy, but I think that's the Russian view. And if that's the Russian view, and our view is we're going to defeat Russia, and Russia's view is we're not going to be defeated, I don't understand what anybody really has in mind other than continued escalation. And it is shocking but not surprising that every day now we have stories, will he or won't he use nuclear weapons? As if this is just another casual story in some newspaper column, as opposed to the existential threat to our survival, which it is. So I believe we don't have a plan. I don't think we have a strategy. We want to defeat Russia, and yet Russia doesn't want to be defeated. And even if we could, which I have my doubts about, defeat Russia on conventional weapons basis, Russia has 1,600 active nuclear warheads and 6,000 warheads in total. So I don't understand what our idea is. And this, again, when I speak of our, it's not mine. mine. It's not yours, I think. It's our government's. And I don't even know who's really responsible for this, but it's a very narrow group, and it has almost nothing to do with the American people, and no one's been asked about it, and no one's been informed about it, and no one's been told about it, and yet here we are near the brink of nuclear war. And we are near the brink of nuclear war. That's true. So to my mind, we are in a wildly wrong-headed approach. Oh, how did we get here? Again, this is much contested. There are two very different narratives. One narrative is Putin is, has delusions of grandeur and thinks he's Peter the Great and he's going to recreate the Russian Empire. That's the American story we're told all the time. I have a very different view, which is that we got here because the United States just can't keep its goddamn nose out of anyone's backyard. And we kept pushing NATO enlargement. And I was there 32 years ago as advisor to Gorbachev, and then advisor to Yeltsin, and advisor to Kuchma, first president of independent Ukraine. And I was an advisor to Yatsenyuk just after the 2014 event. So I've watched this pretty close up for 32 years. And I think the U.S. is the provocation. This does not play well in the U.S. media. In fact, it doesn't play at all. I can't get an op-ed published in the U.S. media. They're not interested. They don't want to have any debate at all. So I think it is absolutely true, by the way, that the U.S. and Germany told Gorbachev in 1990. Gorbachev offered, by the way, to disband the Warsaw Pact. That came from Gorbachev. We said, if you disband the Warsaw Pact, we will not use the occasion to move NATO to the east. And that became a condition, actually, for German reunification. And it was absolutely explicit. Now, since our government lies about everything, the narrative is, oh, we never promised, which is not true. And there's a whole vast documentary record of the U.S. promising no enlargement. Well, of course, as soon as the Soviet Union went away, we thought it was a juicy opportunity to enlarge NATO, and started with Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, 1999, and then George W. Bush Jr. added 7 more countries, 3 in the Baltics, so 3 right on Russia's border, Bulgaria and Romania, which is Russia's Black Sea region, and Slovakia and Slovenia. And we continue NATO expansion. And in 2008, Bush said, now we'll go to Ukraine and to Georgia. And to my mind, this was just absolutely the most provocative thing we could do. Because now we're pushing NATO right up against Russia's core security concerns. And the Europeans, many European leaders told me in 2008 how dangerous this was and how much they were against it, but the U.S. calls the shots.
I think the main fact in U.S. democracy right now is not really polarization, but we have our culture wars. It's really the capture of the instruments of power by particular corporate lobbies. Almost all of our societies parceled out now. The financial world parceled out to Wall Street, the health sector parceled out to the big health industries, the foreign policy to a shocking extent parceled out to the military industrial complex, the energy sector parceled out to big oil and gas, though it's obviously under stress because of climate realities. And while we battle left and right, red and blue, the reality is actually the government is mainly run and operated by powerful interests. In the U.S., the elections that we just had in the United States were funded funded probably $8 or $9 billion in this cycle of election. The next presidential election in 2024 will be a $15 to $20 billion affair. Now, this is big corporate money going into politics. It manipulates politics. It basically controls the politicians of both parties. The chairman of our House and Senate committees reap huge flows of funds from the industries that they purportedly oversee. And it reaches a point of absurdity. Recently, of course, we had the cryptocurrency collapse, and this Sam Bankman-Fried, who brought down his cryptocurrency trading unit, he was being advertised just the days before on a panel with our Secretary of Treasury, Zelensky, and Zuckerberg. The four were part of a New York Times panel coming up before the guy went bankrupt and is now enmeshed in mass fraud. And this guy, this kid, 30 years old, was the second largest donor to the Democratic Party in this cycle, basically with stolen and fraudulent money. And somehow Ukraine is in the mix of this and so forth. But my point is, basically big money took over our politics, and it has wrecked our politics, and it's wrecked the politics of both parties. Now, then comes the role of digital in all of this. And I'd say the media more generally, I'm not saying anything new or surprising to say we live in a sea of lies right now. But I think the main point I would emphasize, at least in the U.S. context, is most of the lies are coming from government or government and industry alliances. So it's not so much the spontaneous lying and waves of fake information that come from social media, it's actually public lying. Much of what we're told about this war in Ukraine is lies. This has been a manipulation basically from the start. My view is the United States helped to provoke this war very much by its push for NATO enlargement to Ukraine, to Georgia. We're not allowed to say that on mass media anymore because the mass media is engaged in official narratives. My guess, the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. The U.S. and U.K. blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. The president said we were going to end it. He actually said it, but if you try to say this in the media, you can't say it. I know I was cut off when I have tried to say these things. I am of the view that even COVID-19, the virus, came in some way from U.S.-China lab research, and I've been part of a detailed effort to document this as much as possible, but it's against the official false narratives. Of course, the social media add to this, but I'm not sure the fake news is really it. Whenever there's a new medium of communication, those who hack that medium do use it for their purposes. This was true of radio with the demagogues of the 1920s. It was true of television after World War II, and it's true of the social media now. But it's a feature of the media more than of digital per se, but because we're in a digital media era, it's definitely amplified right now. I think what digital does, though, is enable deep fakes more than before. We're losing touch with what's real and what's not real. In a way, we're being thrown back into Plato's cave, I would say, because we see shadows or we see deep AI that makes us believe certain things, but a tremendous amount of the manipulation comes from the state. I'm sorry to say, not surprisingly, that's where the power and the money is, and that's where the corporate media partner, and there's clearly a lot of that going on, like the New York Times featuring the Sam Bankman-Frieds of the world, and together with Zelensky, together with the finance minister of our country, Secretary of Treasury, together with Mark Zuckerberg. My word. So this is, I think, the situation that we're in. We we have a hacked political system. We have lost public control. One of the things that I've been doing for the past 20 years is tracking the difference of public opinion and legislative outcomes. That's part of the hacking. You know, the American public, little weird, but not so weird as you would think. And on most issues, 70% normal, I would say. We have pretty significant majorities for fighting climate change, for example, for getting money out of big politics, for taxing the rich more, for staying out of wars. But that's not what we do in our politics. That's what I mean by the hacking of our democracy. It's not that the public's crazy. It's that the political system is controlled and manipulated. Just a couple of hours ago, I was part of the Valdai discussion group in Moscow. It was an online meeting, great discussion with Russian colleagues. We're in a cancel Russia mode right now in Europe and the United States, which is tragic, absurd, just stupid and dangerous. But I had a wonderful discussion with Russian colleagues on a number of issues, including the G20 summit that just took place, which on the whole, just to summarize, showed that the world could actually still get together and do something useful. And maybe it argues against what I'm saying. It was the face-to-face meeting of leaders that probably chilled them out a little bit. You know, if I could stick with the government just for a moment, the reason Americans don't trust our government is that it's not trustworthy. And I'm now 68, so I've lived a long time through a lot of administrations. And basically, the U.S. government has been lying to me my whole lifetime, and lies of a major sort. You know, I was young when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. They lied about that. The Warren Commission was a lie. Then we had Richard Nixon, and he lied about everything, but he lied about Watergate. We had the Vietnam War, which was a lie, and the Pentagon Papers revealed that lie. And it's been on and on. We had the Iraq War completely on phony circumstances, and now I saw, as I was chairing the Lancet COVID-19 Commission, how the U.S. government is lying about the virus. We don't know where the virus came from, but they're certainly not telling the truth about what they know. That is for sure. From the very beginning, they aim to tell us a narrative rather than tell us the truth. The truth may be they don't know, but they claim to know that it's from nature and it's not from these research activities and so on. And I think we don't know, but they clearly haven't told us the truth. So the breakdown of trust is real because the government's not trustworthy. Why? Well, because we're an imperial power. It happens in the United States, and empires don't tell the truth very much, because if they told the truth, they'd stop being empires, for one thing. And they have taken, I think it's unfair to invoke Machiavelli here, but I will do so anyway. They take the idea that the goal is power, and you do what you can to hold on. So I have a very simple prescription, very naive, but very simple. Tell the truth and trust will come back. And we're feeling a lot of distrust because things are not the truth. Look, 2 days ago, a missile a missile landed in Poland and killed a couple of people. At the beginning, Zelensky said, Russian missile attack. There was suddenly calls for NATO engagement in Article 5 and so forth. Then, actually, the U.S. to not have World War III said the truth that, this looks like it was a Ukrainian missile, not a Russian missile that landed. And the Ukrainian foreign minister said, that's a conspiracy theory. This was a Russian missile. Somebody's lying here. And it's not a game what we're in. We're in a life and death situation. And we're playing with facts right now. We're playing with narratives, I should say, more literally. And this is why the trust is absolutely so low. And maybe it is right that the social media have one influence on this, which is many politicians have said to me that they live in a nonstop 24/7 continuous news feed, that they don't even have a daily news cycle anymore. It's a minute-to-minute news cycle. And so everything is reactive, everything is manipulative, everything is to keep the narrative, everything is to stop for a moment and a breath. I don't know whether that's it, but if we want to have trust, we have to be trustworthy. That's the main point. Trustworthy means telling the